At 1 o'clock, Sherlock Holmes and his companion departed from number 3 Lauriston Gardens. They proceeded to the nearest telegraph office, where Holmes sent a lengthy telegram. Subsequently, they hailed a cab, and Holmes instructed the driver to take them to the location provided by Lestrade.
There is nothing like first-hand evidence. My mind is entirely made up upon the case, but still we may as well learn all that is to be learned.
You amaze me, Holmes. Surely you are not as sure as you pretend to be of all those particulars which you gave.
There's no room for a mistake. The very first thing I observed on arriving there was that a cab had made 2 ruts with its wheels close to the curb.
That seems simple enough, but how about the other man's height?
The height of a man can be told from the length of his stride. It is a simple calculation, though there is no use in boring you with figures.
And his age?
If a man can stride 4.5 feet without the smallest effort, he can't be quite in the sear and yellow.
The fingernails and the trichinopoly?
The writing on the wall was done with a man's forefinger dipped in blood. I can distinguish at a glance the ash of any known brand, either of cigar or of tobacco.
And the florid face?
That was a more daring shot, though I have no doubt that I was right.
My head is in a whirl. How came these 2 men into an empty house? What has become of the cabman who drove them? How could one man compel another to take poison? Where did the blood come from? What was the object of the murderer, since robbery had no part in it? How came the woman's ring there? Above all, why should the second man write up the German word Reich before decamping? I confess that I cannot see any possible way of reconciling all these facts.
You sum up the difficulties of the situation succinctly and well. There is much that is still obscure, though I have quite made up my mind on the main facts. As to Paul Lestrade's discovery, it was simply a blind intended to put the police upon a wrong track. By suggesting socialism and secret societies, it was not done by a German. The A, if you noticed, was printed somewhat after the German fashion. Now, a real German invariably prints in the Latin character, so that we may safely say that this was not written by one, but by a clumsy imitator who overdid his part. It was simply a ruse to divert inquiry into a wrong channel. I'm not going to tell you much more of the case, Doctor. You know a conjurer gets no credit when once he has explained his trick, and if I show you too much of my method of working, you will come to the conclusion that I am a very ordinary individual after all.
I shall never do that. You have brought detection as near an exact science as it ever will be brought in this world.
I'll tell you one other thing. Patent Leathers and Square Toes came in the same cab, and they walked down the pathway together as friendly as possible, arm, in all probability. When they got inside, they walked up and down the room, or rather, Patent Leathers stood still while Square Toes walked up and down. I could read all that in the dust, and I could read that, as he walked, he grew more and more excited. That is shown by the increased length of his strides. He was talking all the while, and working himself up, no doubt, into a fury. Then the tragedy occurred. I've told you all I know myself now, for the rest is mere surmise and conjecture. We have a good working basis, however, on which to start. We must hurry up, for I want to go to Halley's concert to hear Norman Neruda this afternoon.
That's Audley Court in there. You'll find me here when you come back.
Audley Court did not possess an appealing charm. The narrow passage guided them into a courtyard paved with flagstones and surrounded by shabby residences. They carefully navigated their path amidst clusters of grimy children and past rows of weathered laundry until they reached number 46. The door bore a modest brass plate inscribed with the name Rance. Upon inquiry, they learned that the constable was currently in bed. They were then directed to a small front parlour where they waited for his arrival. Shortly thereafter, the constable emerged, displaying signs of irritation due to being awakened from his slumber.
I made my report at the office.
We thought that we should like to hear it all from your own lips.
I shall be most happy to tell you anything I can.
Just let us hear it all in your own way as it occurred.
I'll tell it you from the beginning. My time is from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. At 11 there was a fight at the White Hart, but bar that all was quiet enough on the beat. At 1 o'clock it began to rain, and I met Harry Murcher, him who has the Holland Grove beat, and we stood together at the corner of Henrietta Street a-talking. Presently, maybe about 2 or a little after, I thought I would take a look round and see that all was right down the Brixton Road. It was precious dirty and lonely. Not a soul did I meet all the way down. Through a cab or two went past me. I was a strolling down, thinking between ourselves how uncommon handy a 4 of gin hot would be, when suddenly the glint of a light caught my eye in the window of that same house. Now, I knew that them 2 houses in Lauriston Gardens was empty on account of him that owns them, who won't have the drain seed too, though the very last tenant, what lived in one of them, died o' typhoid fever. I was knocked all in a heap, therefore, at seeing a light in the window, and I suspected as something was wrong. When I got to the door...
You stopped and then walked back to the garden gate.
"What did you do that for?" "Why, that's true, sir, though how you come to know it, heaven only knows. You see, when I got up to the door, it was so still and so lonesome that I thought I'd be none the worse for someone with me. I ain't afeard of anything on this side of the grave, but I thought that maybe it was him that died of the typhoid, inspecting the drains what killed him. The thought gave me a kind of turn, and I walked back to the gate to see if I could see Murcher's lantern, but there wasn't no sign of him, nor of anyone else."
There was no one in the street?
"Not a living soul, sir, nor as much as a dog." Then I pulled myself together and went back and pushed the door open. All was quiet inside, so I went into the room where the light was a-burning. There was a candle flickering on the mantelpiece, a red wax one, and by its light I saw...
Yes, I know all that you saw. You walked round the room several times, and you knelt down by the body, and then you walked through and tried the kitchen door, and then...
"Where was you hid to see all that? It seems to me that you knows a deal more than you should."
Don't get arresting me for the murder. I am one of the hounds and not the wolf. Mr. Gregson or Mr. Lestrade will answer for that. Go on, though. What did you do next?
I went back to the gate and sounded my whistle. That brought Murcher and 2 more to the spot.
Was the street empty, then?
Well, it was, as far as anybody that could be of any good goes.
What do you mean?
I've seen many a drunk chap in my time, but never anyone so crying drunk as that cove. He was at the gate when I came out, a-leaning up agin the railings and a-singing at the pitch of his lungs about Columbine's new-fangled banner or some such stuff. He couldn't stand, far less help.
What sort of a man was he?
He was an uncommon drunk sort of man. He'd have found himself in the station if we hadn't been so took up.
His face, his dress, didn't you notice them?
I should think I did notice them, seeing that I had to prop him up, me and Murcher between us. He was a long chap, with a red face, the lower part muffled round.
That will do. What became of him?
We'd enough to do without looking after him. I'll wager he found his way home all right.
How was he dressed?
A brown overcoat.
Had he a whip in his hand?
A whip? No.
He must have left it behind. You didn't happen to see or hear a cab after that?
No.
There's a half-sovereign for you. I'm afraid, Rance, that you will never rise in the force. That head of yours should be for use as well as ornament. You might have gained your sergeant's stripes last night. The man whom you held in your hands is the man who holds the clue of this mystery, and whom we are seeking. There is no use of arguing about it now. I tell you that it is so. Come along, Doctor.
They departed for the cab in unison, leaving their source of information in a state of disbelief, visibly uneasy.
The blundering fool. Just to think of his having such an incomparable bit of good luck and not taking advantage of it.
I am rather in the dark still. It is true that the description of this man tallies with your idea of the second party in this mystery. But why should he come back to the house after leaving it? That is not the way of criminals.
The ring, man, the ring. That was what he came back for. If we have no other way of catching him, we can always bait our line with the ring. I shall have him, Doctor. I'll lay you 2 to 1 that I have him. I must thank you for it all. I might not have gone but for you, and so have missed the finest study I ever came across, a study in Scarlet. Why shouldn't we use a little art jargon? There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colourless skein of life, and our duty is to unravel it, and isolate it, and expose every inch of it. And now for lunch, and then for Norman Neruda. Her attack and her bowing are splendid.
As they reclined in the cab, Holmes began to sing joyfully, much like a lark in its melodious flight. Meanwhile, Dr. Watson found himself deep in contemplation, pondering the multifaceted nature of the human mind.